Okay. I guess I should have made like a preface for this, but I guess we'll just hop right into it.
Yeah, we talked about the preface yesterday, so you're fine.
Yeah, okay, cool. So in your experience, do students have different learning preferences that affect how useful in-person attendance is for them?
Yes. I think that because students actually receive information differently and compound information differently, because again, everybody works at their own pace. I often say that here, and that's true from student to student. Now, again, should they come to class for attendance purposes, because that's really the premise here, the answer is yeah, they should, if they feel that they thrive in that environment. If you're in an online environment, like we are here for our course anyway, and if you can motivate yourself to do the work and to put in the time, then definitely you should take advantage of that. Whatever's going to be best for a person's learning aptitude here. And it's sometimes, admittingly, online, it can be a bit tougher in comparison to a face-to-face course. But at
Hmm.
the end of the day, it comes down to the benefit of the student. How are they going to benefit more? Well, 9 times out of 10, in my opinion, it's going to be if they come to class so they can get some tidbits of information that they may not normally get by just watching a video or just listening, just basically listening to a lecture or reading something out of the textbook. So sometimes you miss those little nuances that may be just as helpful. So, do I believe attendance is helpful? Yeah, I think it is. Do I feel it's required? The answer is no. Okay,
Okay.
the person has to take on responsibility for themselves to put themselves in that position for success. And so for me to tell them that they should do that, I say no, because it's your time, it's your money, and it's your responsibility to want to come or not. I feel that I can't force people to do so, and I told you the first day, like there, Gavin, is like, hey, you're an adult. I'm going to treat you like an adult. And if you want to take it upon yourself to better yourself and, come to class, great. I'm there for you. If you don't, I'm not gonna be upset, but it's your time, it's your life. You can do what you want. There's consequences to that, but you can't really complain if that's the choices that you made. So, um,
Right.
yeah.
So have you noticed or had any students who perform well when they don't attend class? Like, not every class. Do you have people who show up sometimes and still do pretty well?
I would say few and far between. Most people who don't show up tend not to do well because they don't have the proper work ethic to work through things. And once you get to the college level, I don't believe it should be a teacher's responsibility to get them motivated to do it. You can try and motivate them to do it. If you want to put an attendance policy, fine. You can try, but again, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. So I'm not going to force people to do what they don't want to do because what it comes down to is it's the same as homework. I can't make you do homework. It's your own will. There's a consequence for not doing homework,
Right.
right? But if you want to suffer that consequence, be my guest. It's no skin off my back. Now, do I want you to? Of course not. All right, that's ridiculous. All right, but again, if you're willing to accept that responsibility, okay, it is what it is. Um, but I feel that again, it all comes down to willpower. Do you or do you not want to? And nobody can force you to do something you do not want to do. All right. It doesn't
Right.
matter how much forcing down your throat is going to take. I could go
Yeah.
until I'm blue in the face, but it's not going to change a thing. So, like, okay, let me ask you a question here, Gavin. Name a food you hate.
Hmm. Liver.
Huh?
Liver.
Liver. Okay. So you hate liver. So if I came up to you and I said I cooked some nice liver, right? And I say, hey, Gavin, why don't you try this cooked liver? And you'd be like, no, I don't want to eat that. I hate liver, right? You're like, I don't want to eat that stuff. You know I hate that stuff. I don't like, maybe X amount of toppings on pizza too. You're like, I don't want liver on my pizza. Maybe
Sure.
you're like, I don't like onions on my pizza. Whatever. All right. But it's like, okay, no, you should try it. No, you should try it. No, you should try it. And I don't know how many friends you got that are trying to just force stuff down your throat, like literally, like, oh man, you should try this. You should try this. You should try this. And you're just like, no, I don't want to. You tell them like 10,000 times, and guess what's going to happen? They're still going to try and force in your face. But guess what's not going to happen? You're not going to do it anyway.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
I mean,
And so,
that's exactly what it is. I mean,
right. Yeah.
all right.
So
Apologies.
no, you're good. You're good. Um, so another question is here I have. So most students have responsibilities outside of school that are significant. Um, how do you think that these things would affect the student's ability to attend class regularly?
Okay, so to answer that here, we need to take two situations into account. Okay, because the question that you're posing to me here actually has two very distinct answers. The
Hmm.
reason why is because the environment that student happens to be in, right?
Yeah.
We are in a community college, so a majority of our students work. Okay, they have families, they have lives, they work, and they also come to school for the most part. Okay, if we were at a college or university, for example, like your NIU or U of I or whatever the case may be, most of those students are there full time and they're not really working, right? They're just there to do school and school only, right? They're living
Yeah.
on campus and they're doing their studies and everything like that. So that's why I break it down into those two categories because the situation is different for different types of students. If you
Yeah.
talk about it from a community college perspective, then you have to understand that, yeah, that's going to play a rather big role into determining how much time they can give themselves, not only maintaining a family structure, okay, but at the same time, maintaining studies in order to better themselves. I've seen some people who work really hard and then you know what? Like I had a student last semester that worked really hard, and bless her, she did, she tried her best, but she
Hmm.
had like, five kids at home with the husband, and she's kind of
Right.
carrying all the load for her family, at the same time doing this, doing a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes. And she's taken like three, four classes. And I'm like, do you have any time for yourself? Do you have any time for sleep even? Is what I asked her. And, somewhere partway through the semester, she felt so overwhelmed because it's just like, you took so much on your plate. Like, I understand you want to take so much on your plate because you want to get it done right away. But is that helpful for that student? I'm like, no, of course not. And I told her as much. I'm like, hey, this is not helpful for you. It doesn't help your mental health. It doesn't help your physical health, even, because you're running yourself ragged. I said, you can still finish the class. It just means I would you say, hey, you need to drop this class and take it with me again next semester. Do so that way you have your work-life balance kind of filled out. And that for some people can be really difficult to kind of iron out in terms of doing the work and putting in the time and the responsibility. So definitely, I agree. It kind of tends to get in the way for many community college students because there's other obligations that, you
Mhm.
and other students have to take care of, that aren't
Right.
related to academics whatsoever. It's
Sure.
not
And
that
would
you,
you say that,
oh,
do you
go
think
ahead.
that attendance policy should take those into account, especially for like a community college setting?
Honestly, in my opinion, it should, but in my honest opinion, you shouldn't even have an attendance policy to begin with. I
Yeah.
understand that a lot of times it's because of the state regulations and all that jazz and all the
Sure.
politics and stuff. But at the end of the day, um, you know, it really is that, people got lives, I don't and that's why, my previous answer was to look at two different groups of students because
Yeah.
you cannot equate community college students and people who have jobs and lives uh, as closely associated with people who work in colleges or universities where they are more full time and they don't have as many obligations per se.
Sure.
So I think that it's not fair to put the same conditions on community college students in that regard in comparison to college or university students.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, so you would say that, or I guess I should say, when a student is going through, some other things in life, rough patches or whatever, but they're still turning in their assignments and getting good grades on tests, maybe they're not attending class, you don't think that they should be disciplined for low attendance?
No, I think that if they're doing their job, then that's fine. Now, one thing I would say though, in regards to students who've gone through tough times, and I've had plenty come through my classrooms before, is as a teacher, one of the things that I have to do is, kind of play a counselor at the same time, hopefully give them advice, hopefully help them, or again, direct them to our counseling or mental health services because mental health is just as important as, physical health and, life happens. We all don't know what's going to happen here. And so I don't make an assumption and be like, oh, they're doing great because they're all doing all the assignments. I don't know, but sometimes you can see it with the work that they do. Sometimes for people who are going through those particular rough patches, you'll see that their grades start to just dip down, because they're so focused on, things that would heavily affect them mentally or physically that yeah, I could totally see why your grades would dip down or you wouldn't be able to do your work, and that's kind of important to note here is that if they did all the work, you can't tell even for me, I can't tell as a teacher whether or not you're putting in your time and effort. All right. The only thing that I can see without you telling me is basically looking at the results that you have here and if you're comprehending things as best as possible. But also at the same time, I feel like I have a moral obligation to help students as much as they can, you know, um, you know, you know, just as a sympathetic ear to kind of lean on, during those
Yeah,
situations as well. I think that's important to communicate with students so that way, we can put them in the best position for success. And fortunately for many community colleges, they have a lot of great resources of which to help students for that. So, um, uh, if a teacher does feel that the student may have issues going on and they may not express it outright, we are, we can direct the student to resources or um, there's also like policies in place that the college does direct us to do just in case. It's very, very extremely rare if that ever happens. This is more like high school for like underage people,
sure.
like the mandated reporter thing, for for certain things that happen to children that aren't very nice.
Yeah,
Um,
of course. Yeah.
but because once you're over the age of 18, it's very different. But yeah, it's still important to note there. So I monitor progress with the students, kind of looking at it from a big picture perspective. So
Right.
yeah,
Okay. Um, Overall, do you think mandatory attendance policies benefit or harm student success?
let's see. Now, that's a tough one. Now, all right. So again, I can break this into two parts, but it's a little this one here is a little difficult because
Yeah.
on one hand, you can make an argument that if you have mandatory attendance policy, right, it forces the student to come in and to put effort toward their particular work. But again, it comes down to willpower for that particular individual and to doing the work that's necessary to pass the course. For some students, maybe they need that push. But does that apply to every student or does that apply to a majority of students? I guess I'll clarify. I don't think so. I think that once you pay for a service, because again, at the end of the day, school is part business as it is much education,
Hmm.
then it's your responsibility to maintain that service. Okay, so if you pay for like a gym membership and you never show up to the gym, well, whose fault is that? It's yours because you decided not to go to the gym. All
Yeah.
right. Okay. So the consequences are you feel no better than what you did 3 months ago when you took the gym membership. So the thing is that that's the way I kind of look at it. Is it beneficial if you go? Sure, you can work out and you can get buff and get your six pack abs or whatever you want. In terms of my six pack abs is spam, but that's neither here nor there. Um, but the thing is that I kind of liken it to that, where if you want to come, then you come. Do I feel it would be beneficial? Yeah, I think it would be beneficial. Do I have to make it mandatory? I say no, because you're you're participating in a business. If I look at it that way, you're participating in a business. This isn't high school where you're underage and you are beholden to more laws because you are under the age of 18. Um, when you're above 18, you have much more freedoms available to you. Okay, you are considered an adult at that time, and then you can make your own choices, much more than you had before. And it's not mandatory to go to college compared to high school. So, that's the way I kind of look at it. It's a complicated question because of
Yeah.
that kind of that kind of nuance there to kind
Yeah,
of
of course.
yeah. And
Well,
it
and that's why it's
depends.
like it's kind of difficult to even write like this kind of paper where it's like two sides equally have great
They have
uh
benefits.
sides.
Now to be fair, Gavin, I think one thing that I can say that will clarify the point is that there are two sides to the argument, but it comes down to the student and how much of a benefit that they would feel by attending the class.
Yeah.
Because
So
at the end of
ultimately you think it should be the student's choice, not necessarily written into policy that they must show up.
correct.
Okay.
I always feel that way because it's like a business transaction and it's up to you to make the effort. So
Right.
I'm not going to get you out of bed. Like, it's not what I like to do. All right. I like to sleep in and don't do anything. That's fantastic. Okay. So, but I can't force people to do things. And I think because I think like that, that's why I don't think mandatory attendance is going to change anything. People still don't have willpower. They feel tired. They're sick. Okay. You know, I, you know, I don't need people to explain to me, all the time, like send me emails, oh, I'm sick today or whatever. I'm like, I don't need to know that. That's not that important. Okay. You don't feel well. All right. Then you just don't come and you make up for the work that you missed.